All right. Just go in there. Does. This is kind of funny. We're in Hebrews. Hebrews 11. Got verses 23 through 29. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who was unseen. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that he who destroyed the firstborn might not touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea, as though they were passing through dry land, and the Egyptians were, when they attempted it, were drowned. Let's pray. Dear great and glorious Heavenly Father, just so grateful and thankful for your word. Father, grateful and thankful for all the acts of faith that we can see throughout the history. Father, how we can use these examples of what faith looks like. Father God, just pray to be with my message. Help me to recall the things I've learned. Father, help me to present them in a way that we can all learn more about you. That's for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Hebrew writer, ever since the first chapter, is building his case for Christ, and you can really see how he keeps piling more and more internal evidence from the scriptures on to build up his case. I mean, this is, again, I always keep saying he's a very good lawyer. He's building his case of Jesus through the scriptures. He's building it through what these Jews, these converted, these Hebrew Christians, converts of Jesus or of Jews, what they knew. And he's saying, look at all these things, and he keeps saying, everything since Genesis, all these physical realities have been pointing to the spiritual reality of Jesus. Look at his life. Look at all the things he's done. Look at how he's fulfilled these things. You can really, once you start seeing how Jesus has lived his life, you can go back to the Old Testament and really see the foreshadows pointing to Jesus. And he's saying, look at the lives, or look at what he's done. And this is he keeps proving this point. You know, he's trying to build up your confidence in who Jesus is. And now he's getting to say, okay, look at all the Old Testament greats and how they lived out their life. Look at how they lived out their life in faith. They don't know what you know. They had to just walk by faith. You're starting to see the whole picture and how it's coming around. But think of Moses. Think of Abraham. God said, do this, and they just had to have trust in him and walk. Faith, by definition, is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. That trust they had was in God. And if you think about it, again, all these people in the Old Testament, they didn't have what we have. Go to 1 Peter. Go off my lesson a little bit here this morning. 1 Peter chapter 1. I'll be recent. 1 Peter chapter 1, 10 through 12. Just real quick. As to the salvation of prophets who prophesy of the grace that would come to you, make careful search and inquiry, seeking to know what person or time the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the glories to follow. It was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you, in these things which now have been announced to you through those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. These things were revealed to them. They were not serving themselves, but us. Their acts of faith all led up to this. They were all doing God's plan from the beginning. And they longed to have what we have, that indwelling of the presence of the Holy Spirit. This is what they were all working towards, but they couldn't have it. But look how they lived out their life in faith. And we should be able to look at their lives and say, you know what? They stood up for all those things. They were able to walk by this faith. What is our problem? Because we have the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. If you go to Deuteronomy 29, jump to the Old Testament real quick. Deuteronomy 29, 14 and 15. This is Moses speaking about a covenant that God has laid out. Now, not with you alone am I making this covenant and this oath, but both with these who stand here with us today in the presence of the Lord our God, and with those who are not with us here today. He's talking about us. It is revealed to him that he's not living out all this thing. He's not serving himself. He's serving us. He's not. That last part there's but both with those who stand here with us today in the presence of the Lord our God, and with those who are not here with us today. He's not talking about some guy that's in the tent a couple hundred yards away. He's talking about us. He's talking about the Gentiles, how this is going to be opened up to the Gentiles eventually. This is all a foreshadow of an Acts. But I just think that's kind of these prophets, these ones in the Old Testament, this was all revealed to them. You're not serving yourself. You're serving someone greater. You're serving the saints that are to come. But what you're doing is you're walking by faith. You have so much trust in God that he says, do this, and you're going to do it. Mr. Harbor's lesson Friday night was how he's talking about the walls of Jericho. You know, think about that. God said, walk around these walls and go sit down. Do this for 7 days. On a 7th day, walk around. I mean, that made no logical sense to anybody. But you know what? They had to take that first step. And they had to take that first step every day. And they had to do that. That made no logical sense that those walls were going to fall or how they're going to penetrate Jericho. But God said to do it, and they did it. And that was all by faith. They were able to take that action. And so the Hebrew writer, what he's doing is he's building up this case for Jesus. He's getting to show you all the internal evidences through the Old Testament, because he's saying, look at all these things. Look at Melchizedek, how it all foreshadows up to Jesus. Okay, now what I want you to do is I'm going to start in Hebrews 11. I'm going to start going through some of these acts of faith, the ones that didn't have all this in front of them, but they just had to believe. They had to trust in God. And here I'm going to start giving you examples out of their life. Since we hit Exodus so hard for, I think, a year, and if you read through Hebrews 11, the verses I was given, it's all about Moses. And I believe we hit Moses very good, all aspects of his life. The one verse that really kept sticking out to me in Hebrews 11 was verse 23. It says, by faith, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. I had to keep going over that in my head. I had to take out part of that verse so it made more sense to me. By faith, Moses was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. Now we have to kind of remember what was going on during Moses' day. We have to kind of take that step back. Joseph was gone, because we all remember Joseph, how great of a life he lived, all these dreams that he had, how he was able to say, okay, king, or okay, Pharaoh, you need to store food up because there's going to be 7 good years. Store up as much food as you can. There's going to be 7 bad years. You're going to help Egypt. You're going to help all the surrounding countries make it through the starvation. Joseph was a great guy. He was held up in high regard. Well, the time Moses was born, Joseph and all that generation was gone. They didn't remember who Joseph was. This was probably a couple generations later. But the Pharaoh that was at that time, all he saw all these Hebrews off in Goshen becoming greater and greater and greater. He had this fear. He's like, you know what? What happens if one of these countries attack us? What's going to stop the Hebrews from joining in and overthrowing all of us? In my mind, you know what, dude, they've lived there this long, they haven't bothered you. Why are you all of a sudden you having this problem with them now? But he has a problem with them now. He's saying, okay, they are multiplying, they're thriving. We need to stop this. We need to put some people over them. We need to start making them do hard labor. We need them to start making us roads, start making us some pyramids, start doing all these things. Okay, so they put all this hard labor on them. Well, what happens? Still keep multiplying. Pharaoh's like, man, this is not going good for us. They're still multiplying. They're still getting bigger, and we're still putting more work on them. Put more work on them. That didn't even work. Okay, we're going to start killing some babies here. Because this is the only thing that makes sense to me is, you know what? Bring in the midwives. Bring in the women that help these Hebrew women have these births. They bring them in. Now what? Here's what we're going to do. As you're helping out these women, if you see it's a female, it's okay. If you see it's a male, I want you to somehow kill it on the spot. I don't want this to go on anymore. Well, these Hebrew women, or these midwives, they feared God. You know what? We're not going to go down this path. Those women right there had faith. You know what? We're not going to do what he says we're to do. I'm going to walk by faith. I fear God. You know what? I'm not going to kill his creation. So, goes on for a while. They're still multiplying. They're still getting bigger. Brings in the midwives. What is going on? I told you when it's a male, kill it. Oh, I'm sorry, but you know what? These Hebrew women are a lot stronger than the Egyptian women. They have them before we get there. Next thing you know, they're gone. And sorry, Pharaoh, we're just, this ain't working out. Pharaoh got mad. You know what? Exodus 1:22. It's like, if you're not going to listen to me, what I have to say, I'm going to make out this edict. In Exodus 1:22, the Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born, you are to cast into the Nile. And every daughter, you are to keep alive. That's kind of harsh. Now you're throwing babies into the Nile. You're throwing, I don't know if there's crocodiles or whatever is going on in there, but he's saying, you know what? These babies need to die. These Hebrews, they keep multiplying. This is a problem. We need to end this right now. Well, Moses comes into the world. And they saw Moses was a beautiful child. You know what? We're not going to kill our son. We're not going to throw him into the Nile. We're not going to do what the Pharaoh has told us he wants us to do with my child. We're not going to do that. We're going to hide him. They had faith because they were going against what was told to them. We're going to hide our son. And the one thing that kept sticking out to me in that verse, when I kept going it over and over in my head, the reasoning that says because they said that he was a beautiful child. I kept thinking about that. So you're telling me all the ugly babies got thrown in the Nile? You're justified. If he's ugly, toss him in. But you know what? Moses was beautiful. He was such a great looking kid. Just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. I kept thinking, I was like, man, how many ugly children have you ever seen? But and one of the things I kept reading, and I didn't study this out a whole lot, but supposedly the Jews believed if the child was of great beauty, then he was favored by God, was what their reasoning was. But again, does that justify throwing ugly babies into the Nile? I can't see that being the reasoning. So, where I lost myself in my notes already. I kept going back to when Elijah was born and when Josiah was born, because I kept thinking, if I had to put myself in that place and I was given this child, could I throw him into the Nile? And the answer is definitely I could not do that. I mean, even if President Obama said, you know what, I want all the young babies to get thrown in the Nile, I want them all to get thrown in the reservoir or the Maumee or whatever, I couldn't do it. There's just no way I could do that, because you know what? When you're holding the child for the first time, well, no, I held Elijah for the first time. Well, one, I didn't want to drop it because I thought I was going to break him. But you know what? They're very resilient. God was very good when he made children. They do bounce. But you're holding this child. And, at first it's very humbling. Because you know what? God has given you this responsibility to raise up this child. Not only is he of your blood, but then you really start thinking about, this is God's creation that I'm holding. I kept thinking, you put yourself there. I mean, we know in Genesis 1:26 that these creatures, humans are made in God's image. So if you're that parent, not only am I holding something that's of my blood, but I'm also holding the image of the Father. I'm holding the image of God in my hands, because we were created in his image. How can I destroy something is made in the image of God. Well, the answer is, you can't do that. I wouldn't want to go down that path. And you know what they're saying? You know what? This child is so precious to us. God give him to us. I can't destroy this kid. I can't do it. I can't go through with what the king's saying. Go with me to Psalms. Psalms 127. Psalms 127, verse 3. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. You got to think about this. I mean, having children is a blessing. It's a great gift, a great responsibility handed down by God to you. You know, God has entrusted me with this gift. I mean, I need to raise up this child. And some of the time, I mean, this with Josiah, I held him, and he looked into my eyes, and I looked into his, and I kept thinking, son, what are you going to see in your life? What are you going to see that I'm not going to see? What experiences are you going to have? Am I going to raise you up the way you need to be? I mean, all these things start flooding through your mind. And I mean, I can see Moses' parents looking at him and saying, you know what? I can't destroy this kid. We've already had two. This is our third. I can't do it. Because remember, they had Aaron. They had, I think it was Miriam. You know, in what ways is Moses going to impact this world? Because everybody that's ever held a child, or every father, every mother looks at them like, how is this child going to impact the world? Is this kid going to be a president? Is he going to be an elected official somewhere? Is he going to be a lawyer, a doctor? I mean, an engineer? I mean, there's so many paths that our children can go down. Why would I want to snuff out this life so quickly? But then I was thinking, go to Genesis 15. Something else that might have popped into their head. Another reasoning why they're not going to kill their child of such beauty. Not going to follow the king's or the Pharaoh's edict and throw him into the Nile. Genesis 15, verse 12. This is when Abram was falling into a deep sleep, and then God came to him. Genesis 15:12. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. And God said to Abram, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. Moses' family's like, you know what? We've been oppressed. It's been about 380 years, 370 years. You know what? This might be happening in Moses' time. But I will also judge the nation whom they will serve, and afterward they will all come out with many possessions. And as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, shall be buried at a golden age, good old age. In the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is yet not complete. You know what? Moses gets about this age, it'd be about 400 years. I wonder if he's going to impact how this is going to happen. Well, if he's not going to impact how this is going to happen, you know what? He's going to at least be raised up, and he's going to be able to go into what was promised by Abram, into this country. I kept thinking, you know what? Every father, every mother that's ever had a child always wants better for them. They're always looking out for them. They will go out of their way to give them the best that they can. And I kept thinking, well, you know what? They're seeing that, you know what, this isn't going to happen in my generation. My generation is in the past before this happens, because these 400 years are almost here. But what if Moses and Aaron and Miriam, they're able to be part of this promise that was given to Abram? What if they're able to go into this country that was promised? You know, again, we want something that's greater for our kids. So I kept thinking, you know what, they had all these things they were thinking. And they went against Pharaoh's edict about destroying their child. And it was said to them that these 3 months They were walking by faith for these 3 months. And then it came about, if we go to Exodus chapter 2. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. Again, this is where Hebrews saying is 11:23. For these 3 months, they were walking in faith by hiding this child, by not giving him up. When she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it over with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. I kept thinking about this. The first 3 months of his life, they walked by faith. And then it jumps in Hebrews. It goes past this account of how the mom put the baby into the Nile. Was she walking by faith anymore? Was there maybe a little bit of unbelief? It said that she couldn't hide this child anymore. Couldn't do it. She gave him up. I mean, she did the best that she could. She made a basket for him, covered with tar and pitch, to put him into the reeds. But I think the Hebrew writer jumped over this part because she's not walking by faith anymore. There's some unbelief going on. There's some disbelief. There's something going on. Why all of a sudden, after 3 months, can you not hide this kid anymore? I started looking at that. I started looking into it a little more, and every time they always glorified this moment in her life, in Moses' life, how he was put into the river, and then he was put in the reeds, and then you know what? Miriam was standing there because it was her job. The parents probably walked off, and she's like, you know what? I wonder what's going to happen to Moses. I wonder what's going to happen to this child. And then it floated down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter got it. What was the edict? Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you are to cast into the Nile. She could have said, you know what? This is a Hebrew child. Drowned it right now. That's what her dad said. That was part of the edict. Go ahead and drown that kid. He's Hebrew. Dad said, do it. Drown it. For somewhere, the Hebrew writer is saying, you know what? Those first 3 months, they were going out of their way by faith to hide that child. And something changed. Not sure what, how they were not being able to hide it anymore, but somehow their faith started to waver. And you know what? Pharaoh said to throw the kid in the Nile. Well, we're going to put him in a basket, and we're going to put him among the reeds, and we're going to leave. Go with me to Acts 7. You're like, Adam, you're making a giant leap, because ever since I was in Sunday school, we always were taught how Moses was put in the basket. It seemed like such a faithful thing that she was doing, being able to go down. How did they know what was going to happen? Hebrew writer saying in 11:23, those first 3 months was given to them. They walked by faith. If this was such a great moment of faith that his mom put him in the river, then why isn't it written down as a great moment of faith in action? Why did the Hebrew writer jump to when Moses was older? Acts 7. This is Stephen laying down the gospel for all those to hear. Verse 20. Verse 20. And it was at this time that Moses was born, and he was lovely in the sight of God. He was nurtured 3 months in the father's home. And after he had been exposed, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and nurtured him as her own. That part in verse 21. And after he had been exposed. Stephen's saying something there, and it took me a few minutes and some digging to find out what Stephen was saying when he said exposed. Stephen was saying that baby was put out to die. That's what Stephen was saying. That baby was put out to die. Mom and Dad walked away. That was not a moment of faith. for them, because they had no idea what was going to happen. So I really appreciate how the Hebrew writer is taking moments, clippings in these people's lives, and he's saying, look at how they walked here by faith, how he walked here by faith. Yes, it all came about that, you know what, it all worked out for the best. Moses was saved, he was able to go into Pharaoh's household. We all know that his mom was able to be there with him because Pharaoh's daughter didn't know who she was, but you know what, take care of this child for me. Yeah, sure, I'll take care of my own kid. Did I just threw in the river a few minutes ago? Yeah, I'll take care of him for you. I was able to, she's able to raise him up. She was able to tell Moses of his people, how you were able to have all these things given to you in Pharaoh's household, how you're able to be taught the best things of Pharaoh's, um, of the Egyptians' customs, how they had all these gods, how they're able to do all these things. And also mom was there to say, you know what, son, Moses, here's your true lineage. This is who you really are. My whole point of this whole lesson was sometimes even stuff that I was taught a long time ago that we take for granted as moments of faith, that we think that, you know what, Moses' life, this part in his life is always talked about so greatly, about how mom put him in the river. We always think about, you know what, it always worked out best in the end. But we really need to go back to what we know and line it up with what the scriptures say and see what these moments of faith were before and after in these people's lives. Because you know what, until I really did this lesson, I really never looked at, I always thought that was faithful from the beginning, you know, her putting him in the river and everything that came about. I thought that was all working by faith. And the more and more I kept looking at it, I was like, you know what, she had, something was going on in her mind. That, I don't believe that was a moment of faith anymore. That was a strong conviction, you know, of what she had when this child was first born, about how she was going to do everything in her power to hide it and take care of him. And I guess I just kept thinking about, you know what, maybe we need to go back and relearn what we know. We need to be able to go back and tear these things apart and maybe to see them in a different light and be able to build up our own faith by what these people did, and then learn from their lessons in their life about where maybe they took a step back and a little bit of unbelief. So maybe have any comments, questions, concerns, complaints? No? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Gracious Father, just grateful and thankful for your word. Father, I'm grateful and thankful for all the examples of faith in action that we see. Father, how people trusted in you. Father, how they lived this out. And Father, I pray that sometimes we look at these accounts, and Father, we need to maybe look at them from a different perspective and maybe see where faith was wavering a little bit. But Father, we can learn from these lessons. Father God, I'm just so grateful and thankful for your completed word. Father, I'm just grateful and thankful for all that you do for us and all you continue to do. And I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.